Hey guys, Russell here from homebrewerpublic.co.nz. How you going? We've got something really different for you today. I'm going to have a crack at making my first ever batch of wine. Let's get into the video. Hi guys, Russell here. Welcome officially to today's video. Like we said, we're making our first ever batch of wine. I'm going to be using the WineXpert Pinot Noir kit. We're going to check out the kit itself, we're going to check out the brewing equipment, and we're going to cover the brewing process step by step. This is the kit itself that I'm using, guys. Quick note, this does not come with the starter wine brewing kits like beer kits. This is purchased separately. The first observation is 4 weeks. So having noticed that, and also having had a pre-read of the instructions that are in here, the brewing process for wine when compared to beer or cider is longer. Had a quick look online. What is a Pinot Noir? Pinot Noir, the name comes from the grapes that are used to produce the wine, primarily associated with the Burgundy region of France. Pinot Noir, also known as or referred to as Pinot Nero, hopefully I pronounced that right, essentially translates to pine and black. So the word pine comes from the shape of the cluster of grapes. They tend to be tightly clustered and in a pine cone shape, and then black being black. So that's where the name Pinot Noir comes from. It essentially refers to the grapes that are used to produce the wine. Either way, we're talking about this kit here. Let's open it up. Okay, I've never actually opened one of these before. So here is what we got. One very big bag of extract, a packet of oak chips, Cheeto sand, wherever that is, I'm guessing, just guessing, that's the yeast. And then we have some quite specific little packs here. Kesil Sol, sulfite sorbate, bentonite. Strange names, big questions over what each of those does, but what we do have right there is a comprehensive set of instructions. Alright guys, let's have a quick chat about process. What I'm going to do is going to grab that starter kit right there. If you want to know what's in that starter kit, check out the link on the screen now. I did an unboxing video where we checked out what was in there. Essentially what I'm going to do is get this brew mixed up. Now there were 3 things in this kit that I need to use initially when mixing this up. The first one is the extract itself. That probably goes without saying. The second one is the bentonite, and the third one is the oak chips. What I would say is that how to bring these ingredients together are covered in comprehensive step-by-step instructions in the kit. I'm going to go ahead and mix these up. Now, there were a series of additional ingredients that we talked about, the yeast and these ones here specifically. What I'm going to do is revisit how each of these are used at the point where I add them into the mix or add them into the fermenter. What I'm going to say for now is too much talking, not enough brewing. Hey guys, what you just saw was me mix up my first ever batch of wine. Simple-ish anyway. So first piece of good news is that took me approximately the same amount of time as what I would take to mix up a batch of beer. So I checked my video. The little segment of video you just saw was 12 minutes and 47 seconds. So essentially to get to this point from a completely cold start, 12 minutes. Now there's one more step. I have here some oak chips. The instructions are add the oak chips in the barrel now, which we will do. Like I said, the instructions are incredibly clear, and there are variations of this oak product, and depending on the variation you might add them later, but like I said, instructions are clear. Mine are these, add now. They actually smell really good as well. Now, the other thing I've done is grabbed this, which is a sample and trial jar. That will allow me to grab my original gravity reading. The reason that's important is so that I can calculate the alcohol content at the end. From here, I really have two immediate steps. Number one, so get this guy here on, which is the lid, close this up. No particular order. Okay, yeast. So yeast has to go in, and the instructions are add the yeast now. Now, what it does, what is a little bit unusual, maybe not unusual. Okay, what is not on the yeast packet is specific instructions around temperature. If we were using a craft yeast for beer or cider, we would expect to see that on the yeast packet. Potentially this is just a generic yeast. What the instructions advise us though is that we want this sitting somewhere warm between 20 or 25 degrees. So basically keeping it at a warmer temperature. I am going to take this down to the garage and put this into my temperature control fridge. But what I think I'm just going to do off the cuff is add this yeast. There you go guys, quick little look-see before I put this lid on and head off downstairs to the temperature control fridge. 24 hours in the fermenter, bubbling away. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the garage. We are here guys, step 2, stabilizing and degassing. I know, you're going, what are these? Instructions, can't be true. A guy reading instructions. Yeah, I know, but I've botched one too many brews to know it's worth reading the instructions. Especially when they have as many steps as this. Right, so first step, take the SG reading, did that, success. Handy little table up here, and it gives us the day 14 gravity target, and it basically says we want to be under that. If we are, success, which we are, so move on. Next step, what I have here is my carboy, which will also be the clearing vessel, and my siphon and a bucket of sanitizing solution. So essentially what we're going to be doing is opening this guy here, moving the contents of the fermenter into the clearing vessel, and then adding this guy here. Now the step that we're doing here, according to this, is stabilizing and degassing. Degassing, if you're wondering what is going on here, what we have done for the past 14 days is been through a fermentation process. Fermentation in layman's terms is when yeast reacts with available fermentable sugars in our liquid. As a result of that reaction produces alcohol, which is good, tick, but as a byproduct it produces CO2, which is a gas. You will remember we saw the bubbler bubbling, that was CO2 being released, but there will still be potentially a little bit of CO2 just retained in the liquid. So what we're doing is wanting to get the CO2 out of that liquid, which is degassing. So basically, according to the instructions, what we're going to do is we're going to use our siphon down there. We're going to transfer the liquid from here down to our clearing vessel, and then I'll come back, but essentially we're going to get a spoon and give it a stir and add in the next additional ingredient. So let's open this up and get the siphon going. Alright guys, potentially the best angle I'm going to get here. Apologise, not perfect. Right, that guys is our wine. Actually looks pretty good. Right, what I'm doing is giving the siphon a full rinse. So I've run some sanitized solution through the tube, make sure it is sanitized in and out. Okay, what I'm going to do, drop the end of the tube in there. These little guys here, there we go guys, simple as that. The process has begun. A couple of tricks here. If you were smarter than me, you would also have a clip that goes on the side and helps hold this guy, makes life a lot easier. If you are like me, you will be holding it. What will be at the bottom of this fermenter is a layer of sediment. What you want to avoid is pushing this down to the bottom and picking that sediment up. So essentially just follow this down. Normally what I do when I get close to the bottom is just tip it on a bit of an angle as well to see if make sure I get the most possible out. Now apparently the reason we're using the carboy is that we want a clear vessel to complete clearing in. Differs a little bit from beer because I'm less reliant on the visual confirmation that beer is cleared. So we seem to be reliant on a visual confirmation here. Alright guys, essentially what the instructions say is that we're going to use a mixing spoon for 10 minutes to stir that. Here's the problem though. Mixing spoon, doesn't really work out. So I'm going to innovate and use the end. essentially it said stir vigorously in any direction for 10 minutes. So I'm guessing this is going to be a long 10 minutes. Hey guys, done about 5 minutes of agitation vigorously as per the instructions. Somewhat fundamental step, forgot to add our sulfite sorbate, which was step 2.3 ahead of vigorous stirring. So I'm guessing the desired outcome is that this is well mixed through. Right, I will go back to vigorous stirring. Right guys, once complete, sanitized bung, airlock on top. We're going to leave that alone one day, catch you tomorrow. 24 hours since we were last here. Yesterday was all about stabilizing and degassing. Today we start the clarification process, so we are day 15. Now the step for us today is to add this guy here, chitosan, into our mix. The instructions are comprehensive, and I do note that some kits have additional ingredients which go in at this stage. So depending on the kit you've got, you might be adding additional ingredients like more oak chips, for example. But for us, chitosan is it. So let's get this ball rolling. Here we go, guys. In it goes. Too easy. A mixing spoon, sanitized. Stir it in. I would say, even at this point, it smells and tastes awesome. I was sampling last night from the trial glass, looking forward to it. From this point, I'm going to get the airlock back on. From here, the advice is keep it in a warm place out of direct sunlight. Ideal temperature between 20 and 25 degrees. So this will be going back into the temperature control fridge. It's going to sit there for 5 days, and we'll be back in 5 days for the next step in the process. Hey guys, welcome back to the garage again. Day 20. Our carboy has been sitting in the temperature control fridge, which, as per the instructions, constitutes a warm place away from direct sunlight. Instruction now is to lift this boy up, give him a twist, and in theory what that does is allows any sediment which may be sitting on the walls of the carboy to drop from suspension. So I'm going to give that a go. The reason I pulled that out is lifting it up will change the pressure and necessarily pull some water in. And also what I've got there is my temperature controller taped to the side, or the probe. So like we said, give it a little twist, which I've done. Okay, so I'm going to consider that twisted. The instructions now say leave this guy alone for another 5 days. Now what it says is basically check, actually it's more than 5 days, it's day 26. So according to the instructions, polishing and racking day is day 26. So that means we're going to leave this alone for 6 more days. Then we're going to do a check. The check is to make sure that the wine has cleared. If it has not, the instructions say never bottle wine that hasn't cleared. If it's not clear, leave it alone for 7 to 14 more days. If it is clear, you can move ahead and start racking and polishing. So that will be our check. 6 days time, come back and check and make sure this wine is cleared. I'm going to do that by pulling a sample off, having a look at it in a trial glass. All that said, I'm going to leave this alone from here. Catch you soon. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Bottling day. Using the siphon and transferring the wine, in this case back into the fermenter, which will act as our bottling bucket today. We can see how nicely the wine has cleared up, even passing through the siphon tube. That's really beautiful. Having not done wine before, I'm just keeping an eye on the tube up the top, watching for any changes in the clarity. I'm assuming it will be a fine layer, but I'll just take this down, see how we go. So this whole step, which you can see, has taken 12 minutes. There we go. I don't know how, yeah, there's quite a decent layer of sediment in there. So all we can see, you can see it down there on the other side. And I'm just going to stop there and leave it. I've left about 10 mil in the bottom. You can see a little bit of that sediment just in the centre there. Okay, so that is what we're trying to leave in the bottom of the bottling bucket, in the bottom of this vessel. So the idea is that the wine we have taken over to there is our beautiful clean wine. I'm going to put a lid on this. I'm going to go upstairs and we're going to bottle. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the official bottling ceremony. What I have here is 24 bottles. What I have done is I have sanitized all of these bottles, and my approach is that I'm going to use the siphon to transfer the wine from our bottling bucket into each bottle. This is not an approach I would normally use. The reason I'm doing it this way is I wanted to follow the instructions based on the equipment that I had in the kit. But as I say that, I'm actually rather liking the look of this process, if I'm being honest. So let's get this ball rolling. So far, so good. I have to admit, this is actually a really easy and seamless process. Do have to keep an eye on how full the wine bottles get. At this point we have filled 12 bottles, filling our 13th now, and we still have 11 litres in the bottling bucket. Hey guys, welcome to the first official taste test of the WineXpert California Pinot Noir, and of course our first ever wine. First of all, how does this look? Okay, this is how it looks on the bottle. We bought wine bottles, we have corked them, and then we dressed them with a heat seal, red wine specific. This is how it looks on the bottle, and it comes across incredibly well when we hand these over as gifts. $1 million question though. What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our first ever red wine. Now I'm going to apologise, it is a terrible, terrible day weather-wise outside, so there's a really low level of light, and I'm not sure that that's going to give you the best view that really does justice to this wine. But it has come out visually with a great colour and a really clean visual finish. I jumped on the WineXpert website and I had a proper look at this kit. Now, what they say about this kit is body 2 out of 5, oakiness 2 out of 5. So really light, crisp, easygoing drinking. In terms of flavour, tasting, aroma notes, they talk about strawberry, cherry, and earthy. Now, I would certainly agree with both of those, and even in the aroma, the strawberry is very subtle but has a real kind of strawberry sweetness on the aroma, and the cherry note coming through possibly a little bit more strongly. And that is indeed our flavour profile. What I would say about this wine, very smooth and very easygoing. We shared this brew more widely, being our first ever wine, than we've shared anything in the past. And we also shared it with a larger number of people who have never had our home brew than ever before. Generally speaking, the people we shared with can be split into two groups. Group number one, people who have a general appreciation of wine. Their drink of choice is wine, and again, given a choice, they'll go for a red over a white. The second group are your wine enthusiasts, the people who have a finer appreciation of wine, think a little bit more about the flavour and the aroma characteristics, think a little bit more about the general characteristics and the technical elements of the wine. Now, everybody who fell into the first group, the people with a general appreciation of wine, came back with positive feedback. We did hear a lot that people noted the fruitful flavour profile of the wine. There were a couple of comments where people said if we would be happy to have paid for this off a shelf, and overall people said really drinkable, really nice, really easygoing. So massive compliment on that front, and so I would generally agree with that. I think this has come out as a really, really good finished product, especially for my first ever wine, and I'm really happy with it. And I think that feedback there is just testament that it generally ticks the boxes as a good wine that is really approachable and really easy drinking. The people who fell into the second group, the wine enthusiasts, had more specific feedback. So the main piece of feedback which came through from that group is the flavour profile doesn't linger the way they would have expected it to with a red wine. And I don't know whether that is a characteristic of the kit or something that potentially the way we've brewed this from a process perspective, which has affected that. Could be either, I don't know. But that was the feedback that kind of came through. However, in saying that, one of my friends who fits into that group of enthusiasts, whilst she tried the red, her general preference is white. And she had some really interesting feedback. So she said that she did say flavour profile doesn't linger. And then she said, however, in saying that, she noted that the body was really light and really easygoing, and coupled with the flavour profile, that in general it was a really easygoing, easy to drink and approachable red wine. And what she said was that the two, with those things in mind, that it would be a great red wine in the summer, and also a great red wine for people who potentially don't like that slightly stronger flavor profile that might be more common in a red wine. So she said it's really easygoing, really approachable, and would make a great summer red wine, which I thought was good feedback, especially from someone who appreciates the finer elements of wine. I would also say that in general, like I'm kind of comparing this to my first ever beer. My first ever beer was a disaster. It was barely drinkable. I certainly didn't share it with anyone, and I only drank it out of pride, where this is my first ever wine, and I acknowledge that I have a little bit more knowledge around brewing processes, and I had the other main advantage of temperature control. But I think in general, if anyone is prepared to follow the very comprehensive instructions that come with this kit, it is actually really easy to get a good drinkable wine out. I think it's worth, I wouldn't normally do this in a brew review, but being my first ever wine, I will. So there's a few things that kind of jumped out to me. First one is yield of the brew, or of the batch rather. And if I'm comparing this to beer or cider, normally with beer or cider, I would expect a yield of 24 to 28 bottles, normally, or more specifically, normally 26 to 28 bottles, 750ml bottles that is. And that's based on 23 litres of total volume. With the wine, we only got to 25, so 2 cases and 1 spare bottle on the side. I think the yield, if we are comparing it, the yield was lower because of the process. The process in this case had more steps, and particularly more steps where we transferred the brew between vessels for different stages. And each time we did that transfer, we would leave some of the yield in the bottom. I think that was the major reason for that slightly lower yield. However, in saying that, but even based on the yield we got, this is an incredibly cost-effective way to produce wine. I mean, this produced 2 cases and then a spare bottle, and producing that beer is relatively, it really depends on what you're comparing it to, but it is a lot more cost-effective. This, in the same way that brewing beer or cider is more cost-effective than buying the equivalent volume of product off the shelf, this was incredibly cost-effective as well, so it ticks those boxes. The other thing I would say is the process took longer and had more, I don't necessarily want to use the word complexity, certainly had more steps, yes, and it did have a little bit more complexity. So it took longer. If I was brewing beer or cider, it's generally a 2-week process to generate or to ferment and get a batch of brew ready to bottle. The process with this wine took 4 to 5 weeks. It says 4 weeks on the box. The instructions basically say 4 weeks, and then at the very end there's a couple of steps where if it hasn't met certain criteria, you leave it a little bit longer, which I did. So number 1, takes longer. Number 2, there are more process steps. There's a lot, it is more involved, I think, than making beer or cider. There's more process steps involved in clearing. We had quite a big process step around degassing. And then there's a lot more, not many, I mean, there are additional ingredients that we're putting into the wine, which came with the kit at different stages, and quite specific stages. So like I said, it takes a little bit longer and had a little bit more complexity, both in terms of the process steps and in terms of the ingredients that were going in. You definitely need to follow the instructions when you're making a wine. I'll say that much. But to the credit of the wine kits, the instructions are A, comprehensive, and B, really, really clear, which was a great thing. The other thing I would say, I had a small mishap with the corks, and I don't know how clear this will be, but essentially this is the top of the bottle right here, and this is the top of the cork. So in this case, the cork is protruding above the top of the bottle by around 5 to 8 mils, which you might be able to see there. It's not done any damage. It hasn't been a limiting factor in terms of sealing the bottle. The reason I put that down to is we were using a cork that was slightly too big for that bottle, and it was really, really difficult to get into during the corking process. It was really difficult to get that to go in as far as it wanted to, and I found myself using quite a bit of physical strength during that corking process, which I didn't feel right at the time. And one of the things I did is I actually watched a couple of videos on YouTube of people corking, and I watched, and it's an effortless process. So I sort of went, well, if I knew the effort that I was having to put in physically to cork, I was like, that's not what I'm seeing on the videos, which suggests I'm doing something wrong here. I have made another wine since then, and what I did was use a slightly smaller cork and had a very different experience and got a very different result. So in this case, I've used a cork that was slightly too large, I believe. But as I said, it has done what it needed to do, sealed the bottle, and it's worked fine. All in all, I would say for my first ever wine, like I said, highly successful. And my number one judge, as far as I was concerned, was my wife. And I think the memory in this case that I have is when I bottled it, I kept just a little bit aside as the initial tasting samples, and I said, hey, come and try. And she took a sip and she was like, wow, this is really awesome. And then she started quizzing me on how much, and compared how much it was compared to store-bought alternatives and bits and pieces. So my wife endorsed this and has indeed been enjoying a glass here and there with me, which for me, if that was the only outcome I got, I would call that success. I'm not personally a huge wine drinker. I'm not going to profess to be an expert on flavor profiles or wine characteristics. But what I would say, and I've probably already said this, but it's very smooth. It's a very, very approachable and easygoing wine, and I have no issues having this on, having a drink with my wife, having this on the table for dinner, or sharing it with my friends and family and actually being proud of it. So yeah, really happy with how this has come out. Now you probably picked up that we have already done our second wine. What I did is I used another WineXpert kit. This time we've gone the other way and we've done white. Now I've already tried it and done some initial taste tests. There will of course be a full brew review video of its own, which we'll probably post next month or so. But I would say, just based on our initial taste tests, that wine has come out in its own right equally as well as this red has come out. So I would, in that sense, say happy to endorse like the WineXpert range. I've now had 2 experiences where the brews come out really well. Happy to say I've had a pretty consistent experience brewing in terms of following the instructions and getting a good outcome. Yeah, and so if wine is a jam, feel free to jump on in. All that said, guys, I think I've probably been talking enough for this brew review. So what I'm going to say is, if you've watched this far, Facebook group, Homebrewer Public Kit Brewers, find us, check us out. It is primarily about, or the audience in there is primarily engaged around beer and cider, but there are a few people on there who are interested in wine, I know that. So feel free to jump on in, join the conversation. Of course, check out our website, homebrewerpublic.co.nz. But for now, I'm going to say cheers. Catch you next time.
Cheers.